We'll continue with our study of SD 49, chapter 13, SD 49.13. Now this volume, as you know, is a three-part volume on the life of the Buddha. In fact, there's a lot of materials on the life of the Buddha, not so much with the details of the life of the Buddha as a story, but rather the life of the Buddha as teachings. So in other words, whenever the Buddha tells about himself, somehow it is connected with the Dharma. In that sense, we can say the Buddha is an embodiment, or even the embodiment of the Dharma, if you like. Not in the physical sense, but in an active sense. If we say physical in the sense of changing, impermanent, then that is quite acceptable. But nothing mysterious or strange or transcendental. Rather, the Buddha was born a human and he's able to attain transhuman level. In other words, he's able to transcend the five senses, and this is very important to understand. There's nothing magical about it. It is hard work. We are limited by our five senses, and yet the five senses are also our sources of knowledge and understanding of the world around us. Our five senses plus the mind, the six senses, are the world. This is the world that we create, that we live in. This is not to say there's no physical world out there, but there's nothing we can really do about the physical world out there. But we can change how we view that world out there, in other words. So the Buddha represents this kind of person who's able to take charge of his world, if you like. So he's no world creator. In a sense, he's not even a world destroyer, but he's a world transcender. He is able to, as it were, rise above the earth as a lotus into the bright sunlight and kind of awaken to true reality. So this is the kind of stories we get in the Buddhist scriptures. And today's story, today's sutta, is called Gatikara Sutta. Actually, the title is in a plural, Gatikara Suttas, because there are two versions of this teaching. The first one is called the Brahma Gatikara Sutta, S2.24, and then you have the Gatha Gatikara Sutta, which is S1.50. The two suttas are actually identical, except in the case of the Gatha, the verse version, it is in verse, in other words, and it has got an introduction. The discourse S2.23, the discourse on Brahma Gatikara, has got a short introduction, just 2 lines in our translation here. So we will look at this discourse S2.23, where it also covers the verses of the other sutta. Now the context of this Gatikara Sutta of today, it tells us in a sense the present moment of the Buddha's life, where we have this Brahma Gatikara coming to meet the Buddha. Now this story goes back to a previous life, if you like, to the time of Kassapa Buddha. Now, Kassapa Buddha, as you know, was the Buddha just before our present Buddha, and during that time, our Buddha Gautama was a Brahmin by the name of Jyotipala. Jyotipala is in Sanskrit, in Pali rather. In Sanskrit it will be Jyotipala, Jyo. Jyoti here means bright, radiant. Pala means protector. It can also mean protected. So Jyotipala can mean the protector of the light, meaning someone who teaches wisdom, or we can interpret it as protected by the light, protected by the truth, by wisdom, by goodness. So his name was Jyotipala, and it's a rather humorous story, very interesting story about our Buddha in his one sort of a previous life before this time. Now there's a bit of a problem here, because although we say past Buddha, the time span is very huge. So it is possible there are other lives in between the Jyotipala and Gautama Buddha. There is also the Jataka story of Vesantara, and the storyteller tells us actually Vesantara is the Buddha's actual penultimate life. In other words, once he passes away as Vesantara, he's reborn into star heaven as the future Buddha, and then becomes our Buddha. So there are kind of a number of other births intervening between the time he was Jyotipala and his last birth as Gautama Buddha. But our story goes back to the time of Gautama Buddha, when our present Buddha was Jyotipala. He was a young Brahmin, and he has this good friend who is a potter, also named Gatikara. So there we see a link, the beginning of a really old friendship, millions of years old in fact, going back a world cycle at least. So this potter is on the lowest caste in India in those days. So, and of course here we are made to understand that this idea of a potter being low class is an ancient idea going back even into the past. As long as there are humans existing, they have this kind of idea. People are kind of measured by the jobs they do. So anyway, the potter Gatikara, he's no normal human being. He's a very good person. He's almost a saint in that life, in a manner of speaking. So, in fact, under the Buddha Kassapa, we see Gatikara as a non-returner. So we have his own story there with Kassapa Buddha, and he is the chief supporter of Kassapa Buddha. And there is something even more strange about Gatikara. He's a layman, he's a non-returner. Now normally when we speak of a non-returner, we would think of a monk or a nun, but here is a layman. So once you're a non-returner, you are not likely to have dealings with money or sexuality, because you have gone into this deep meditation and you are no more kind of moved by the world anymore. You are basically already a monk, whether you wear robes or you're a layman. So we're talking about this kind of saint in Gatikara. And on top of that, he has two old parents, mother and father, who are blind. So he takes care of his parents. So here you have a saint who is a non-returner, who also takes care of his parents. In other words, we have a kind of a hint here that he's not a monk because he has to take care of his parents, otherwise he would have easily been a monk. But even then, this is no obstruction, no hindrance at all for his spirituality. Although he takes care of his parents, he's still a saint, a much better saint than most monks are, if you like. Now the next question is, how does he take care of himself? Well, he's a potter. So now, potters normally have to dig the ground, but in the case of Gatikara, he doesn't dig the ground. He only takes clay which is exposed on the ground, so he doesn't have to dig and hurt tiny creatures. He makes pots and then he burns them, fires them up, and then he puts them outside with a notice saying that anyone who would like to have any pot, just leave behind some food, some kind of grain or something. So he doesn't have, there's no buying and selling, he doesn't have money, and that's how he earns a living. And although he does this, although he doesn't have dealings with money, he's still the chief supporter of Kassapa Buddha. and he takes care of his parents. Now we come to the story, his link with Jyotipala. So he wants Jyotipala to meet the Buddha. It is as if he has this notion, this feeling that Jyotipala is a very special person, almost like he knows that Jyotipala is going to be the future Buddha, but we're not told that. But his enthusiasm seems to betray this awareness of the spirituality of Jyotipala, or at least they are such close friends that Gatikara wants Jyotipala to meet the Buddha, because he knows that once Jyotipala meets the Buddha, there's going to be a great change in Jyotipala. So he tells Jyotipala, come, let's go and see the Buddha. But Jyotipala just refuses to go. In fact, and I remember he's a Brahmin, and Kashyapa Buddha is a Kshatriya. So, but we're not told that's the reason he's not going. He's just not interested in going. He says, oh, why should I see this monk? I have nothing to do with monks. So Jyotipala kind of used a bit of a trick, as Kifu means. So he tells his friend Jyotipala, they're like two young men, if you like. So he said, let's go down to the river to wash, because Jyotipala has to wash his hair and so on, the usual Brahmanical practices. He goes down to the river, he washes his hair, now he's kind of come out and dressed and drying his hair. Then Jyotipala said, look, we are very near the Buddha now, so why don't we just take a short walk and meet him? Yeah, Gatikara tells Jyotipala that going to the Buddha is nearby. So again, Jyotipala said no. But this time, Gatikara was really he really took Jyotipala by the hair, by the, what do you call that, top knot. And well, before that, he did something else. He pulled him by the belt and says, come, let's go. So you can see here two young people kind of like horsing around with each other, they're close friends. But then Jyotipala, he loses his belt and he ties up his robe and he says, I'm not going. Then in the end, Gatikara takes Jyotipala by the top knot and says, I want you to go. Okay. Now here we have a very controversial situation, because the top knot of a Brahmin is the most sacred part of his body and no one ever touches that part. So here we see a taboo being broken. The potter takes hold of the Jyotipala's top knot. Now Jyotipala, being a good friend of Gatikara, says, oh, this must be serious. This friend of mine goes to all the lengths to pull me by my top knot. I mean, people don't normally do that, and not in that kind of situation. So he's, instead of getting angry, he felt there must be something really big here. I mean, his good friend Gatikara doesn't do such strange things. So he says, okay, we will go. Since you're so serious, we will go. So here we see the kind of camaraderie, this very close friendship. So they both go to see the Buddha. Of course, Gatikara shows the usual respect to the Buddha, greetings and so on. But Jyotipala is not very impressed. Just says something like, say hi, and that's it. That is until the Buddha started teaching. Once the Buddha started teaching, a change suddenly came upon Jyotipala. He realized that this is what has changed his life. And then, to cut the rest of the story short, he decides to become a monk under the Buddha Kashyapa. And then they pass away. Now, so you have this non-returner passing away. He's reborn in the pure abodes. Gatikara is reborn as a non-returner, Brahma. And Jyotipala moves on, finish off his life to become the future Buddha, and he becomes the Buddha. So many lifetimes has passed, and now we come to today's story. So you can see here the long introduction to this short story today, which is on chapter 13, SD 4913. So he comes to see the Buddha one night. Usually these devas, they'll come in the night, Now, what's interesting is usually the Sudavasa Devas do not come down from their heavens. It's very high up there, and they have no reason to come down to this filthy earth here. But here, because Gatikara, the Brahma now, he is a close friend of the Buddha now, he comes down to see the Buddha. It's like two old friends who have aged, who have become really millions of years old, literally, and they've not met for quite a long time. So now Gatikara is coming down, very happy. I'm sure Gatikara felt like, wow, look, I've got this Jyotipala to see the Buddha, and now he's the Buddha himself. So you see Gatikara living during the time of two Buddhas at least, Kassapa Buddha and Gautama Buddha, and Gautama Buddha is his close friend. So he comes down, and now we see these really old friends meeting together, and this set of verses recounts that meeting. Page 60, ST 49.13a. 13b is the verse version which is included here. The Discourse on Brahma Gatikara, S 2.23. Now this particular discourse has got two extra lines, section 1. Standing at one side, the Devaputra, or young Deva Gatikara, uttered this set of verses in the Blessed One's presence. Okay? So here notice the narrator mentions the word Devaputra. I think the term Devaputra here refers to someone who is newly arisen in that heaven. That's what I would suspect. So again, when we say newly arisen, the time span can be quite long compared to earth years. So relatively young Deva, so he comes down, he appears before the Buddha, and now remember all these Devas, whenever they meet the Buddha, they would speak in verse. Just like in Shakespeare's play, you see the nobility normally address each other in verse. So here, the Devas usually address the Buddha in verses, and the Buddha would address the Devas in verses also. But the Buddha, after all, was royalty, he was a prince, if you remember. But that's the tradition we get in the suttas anyway. So Gatikara, the deity Gatikara says, "Reborn in Aviha, the 7 monks are free, utterly destroyed lust and hate, cross over attachment to the world." So he mentions there are 7 monks also reborn who are non-returners, reborn in Aviha. Aviha is the lowest of the pure abodes. Then the Buddha questions, and who are they who have crossed the Maya, the swamp here meaning samsara, suffering world, death's realm so hard to cross? Who, having left the human body, have gone beyond the heavenly yoke? Then the Gatikara replies, Upaka and Palaganda and Pukusati, these are the 3. Patiya and Kandadeva, Bahudanti and Pingya, they have shed the human body. They have gone beyond the heavenly born. So these are monks in the Buddha's time too, and they all have attained non-returning. And then the Blessed One continues, the Buddha continues and asks, skillful is what you say of them, who have abandoned Mara's snare. Mara's snare means sensual desires. Whose dharma have you understood that cut off the ties of existence? Then Gatikara replies, none other than that of the Blessed One, none other than your teaching. It is your dharma that we have understood, that cut the ties of existence. Now notice here, Gatikara, as we know, he attained non-return during Kassapa Buddha's time. But he didn't say Kassapa Buddha's dharma. He says, number 1, he says, your teaching. and then he used the word Blessed One in your teaching. Because here it's the same Dharma, so to speak. The Kassapa Buddha's teaching, Gautama's teaching. In the case of Gatikara, he became a non-returner in Kassapa Buddha's time, but the other monks in our Gautama Buddha's time. And then Gatikara continues and says, where name and form ends without a trace, through understanding here that Dharma that cuts the ties of existence. As we're saying, through the teaching, practice, and again, non-return and then awakening in due course. And then the Buddha continues and says, again, notice this is the third question the Buddha is asking. Deep is the word you utter, difficult to fathom, not easy to understand. Having understood whose Dharma do you speak these words? Right? Now, we often speak of the Buddha as being omniscient. In other words, the Buddha knows everything, so the Buddha is going to say, I know what he's going to say. Then there will be nothing to record. So here, the Buddha is going through the motion, so to speak. He's asking all these questions. He may or may not know the answer, but the point is, when we say the Buddha is omniscient, it's not like he's receiving information all the time. He says that would be impossible, that would be not, that would drive a person mad to get so much information at one time. Whenever he wants to know something, he directs his mind and he's able to know that, in other words. So in this case, he chooses not to find out what Gatikara is going to say. He just asks a question, he knows the answer is going to come. And he does this for our benefit today. In other words, you have this wonderful divine dialogue so that we today have a chance to see these two great saints talking to each other for our joy and our benefit. So now the Buddha continues and asks, understanding whose Dharma do you speak these words? In other words, he's asking for more information. So can you tell me more about yourself, how your training was, and so on. Now, the Brahmagatikara tells his story. Verse 8. Verse 8 is the internal numbering. Then you have the verse numbering is 347. A potter before was I, Gatikara of Vehalinga. I supported my parents as a lay disciple of Kassapas. Okay, there you are. This is a story from the Brahmagatikara Sutta, and I think it's number M81 if I'm not mistaken. Right, M81.
But that is not Brahmagatikara.
Sorry, Majjhima. The title is Majjhima Gatikara Sutta. It's not yet Brahma there, it's still a layman. So, he says if he is a lay disciple and supported his blind parents. Abstaining from sexual intercourse, I was celibate, free from the carnal. Your fellow villager was I. Your friend in the past was I. There you are. So here, see, we come from the same village. We have good friends. Okay? So here is a very warm situation. Two great saints coming together and say, hey, we are old friends. And then he continues, Gatikara continues and says, I know the 7 liberated monks who have utterly destroyed lust and hate, who have crossed over the world. Then the Buddha replies and says, that was indeed, it is, just as you say, Bhagava. Okay, so here Bhagava is a familiar term which the friend in the past, Jyotipala in the past, calls the potter, and it's kind of a special term used, especially among friends. So once the Buddha utters this word, it means he recalls the old friendship. He addresses this non-returner Gatikara by the friendly name Bhagava. Notice the double G, it's not single G, okay? Bhagava. A potter you were before, Gatikara of Vehalinga. Now here we have two names. He mentioned Vihalinga, but Buddha speaks as Weberlinga. So we have two variants of this place, this ancient place in Kassapa Buddha's time. Then the Buddha is kind of recounting the story of Gatikara. The Buddha continues and says, "You supported your parents, a lay disciple of Kassapas, abstaining from sexual intercourse, celibate, free from the carnal. My fellow villager, a friend to me in the past. Thus indeed it was." Now, okay, we have to look carefully now and see who is talking. This is very important in reading Buddhist scriptures as literature. We have to kind of be aware who is talking now. Okay, so this verse 352 is the narrator who is talking. So the narrator is giving us the background, concluding this story. He says, "Thus indeed it was, the meeting of ancient friends, both cultivated of mind, bearers of their final bodies." So in Indian literature, we find this kind of levels of narration. And sometimes you have a story within a story within a story. You can go up to 3-4 levels deep even. So this is called a nested narrative. Okay, we find, and in the sutta we don't find so much, it's not so complex. But in the Dhammapada commentary stories, the narrative levels, the nested levels can be quite complex, especially in the story of Samawati, called the Udena cycles. In other words, can go down to up to even 4 levels deep. Anyway, so here the verse ends. We have two ancient friends meeting each other, the Buddha and the ancient potter, the Brahma Gatikara. So here, this story shows us that even among the saints, there is this friendship, spiritual friendship, this kind of friends helping each other. So you see this, the Jyotipala and Gatikara, the Brahmin youth and the potter as good friends, and how they kind of one help the other to take that spiritual step ahead, even to the extent of practically forcing him to meet the Buddha, so to speak. Of course, the story is not encouraging us to be violent with friends and drag them to see the Buddha, but rather here is to show that they are so close to each other that Gatikara was, or rather is willing to take liberties to that extent, because he knows that his action will bring good and bring no harm to Jyotipala, because we're talking about the future Buddha. But there is a little dark note here, very interesting kind of sideline here. The Jyotipala, the young Brahmin, he was not happy to see the Buddha at first. In fact, he uses quite nasty words. He says, "Oh, that bald-headed guy, who wants to see him? I'm not interested," that sort of thing at first. He was kind of just refusing to go until he actually meets the Buddha. So the later tradition, this is not Sutta tradition, this is the commentary tradition, the Sutta tradition, said that because this Jyotipala made that remark, because he was so disrespectful to the Buddha, he had to go through 6 years of self-mortification, right? Otherwise he would have just right away just go through 1 year of renunciation or even a few months of renunciation and become the Buddha. But because he made that nasty remark, he went through that kind of 6 years of terrible self-torture. Of course, it doesn't mean much to our Buddha, because he's going through all that difficult practices. In a way, shows us that they don't work. Because if he didn't actually practice those things, then his opponents could accuse him, say, "How can you talk about these things? You have not done them yourself," right? So you notice in the life of the Buddha, the last life, as a young man, he lived a very luxurious, pleasurable life. He lived in a time when the Kama Sutra was written. You might even say the Kama Sutra was written because of the kind of lifestyle. So he went through all that, and he found that didn't help. That didn't bring him any awakening, any happiness. And then he went through the other extreme of letting go of the body, even trying to destroy the body, taking in all the pain that the body can take. Again, that didn't help. So these two extremes, bodily pressure, bodily pain, did not work, did not bring any answer to life. So he realized the answer must lie in between, in other words, avoiding both. And so he took the middle way, and the rest is history. He becomes awakened as the Buddha. So that's our story for today. A beautiful reflection on the verses of Katika. Let us now close with a short reflection. When we read and reflect on the lives of the Buddha, whether of the present or the past, there is always something we can connect to be inspired, to guide us in this life itself, not to give up in face of difficulties, and to rejoice the blessings that we have for further spiritual development in this life itself. So the life of the Buddha is itself a teaching to guide us to greater happiness. Reflecting in this way is very good karma. By the power of such karma, may we be empowered and blessed with the wisdom and courage to aspire to attain stream winning, at least stream winning in this life itself. By the same token, by the power of the three jewels, the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, let us cultivate loving kindness towards ourselves, towards our loved ones, and those who have been kind to us. May they be well, may we be well, may we be happy, may there be no obstructions at all in our practice. May we be able to overcome all difficulties in life with goodness. And also let us send out our loving kindness to all those people who have difficulties in finding the truth, that they may see the truth in joy and light in this life itself. May all beings be well and happy. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.